just started. We're in our second year, and despite the great pause, we're doing all right.
All right. Well, since this panel is about diversifying your audience, I want to open it up and ask y'all, what does diversity mean to you in terms of the work that you do?
Well, for us, diversity is about serving a broad cross-section of audiences and musical taste. In Detroit, which is approximately 85% African American, diversity for us means inviting and welcoming audiences who are not African American into the house, and not being limited by people's perceptions of what the taste of African American audiences actually is.
And I would very much mirror what Shahida said. For me, being a queer Black woman, I wanted to also create a space where I consistently felt safe. So I think that, I think right now in the current climate, when people think about diversity, they think, primarily, I think along racial lines, but I think that there are a lot of different sort of ways that we can look at it. Again, as Shahida had mentioned, from, genre to, what your makeup of your audience is, getting more women to come out to shows or to perform, or, one of the things that we are working a lot on here in Des Moines in particular is trying to engage youth to become larger consumers of live entertainment. I know, as being the parent of two small kids, they would much rather, play with their friends online or experience a concert online than necessarily actually going into a venue and seeing it. And so we have several different programs where we're trying to engage youth too. So it's, diversity of age, genre, race, gender, ethnicity, all of those kinds of things.
I would say diversity is just the constant process of expansion. It's expanding your market, it's expanding your mind, it's expanding your abilities to what you do. I took a geology course when I was in high school, and it talked about the two major flows of energy that occur in the earth: isostasy and entropy. Either we are expanding energy or we're depleting energy. And I think that the responsibility for everyone is to focus on the isostasy, to focus on expanding their concepts, expanding their mind, expanding their audience, figuring out what they can do successfully, how they can make things work. And then there will be crazy times like what we're dealing with now, in which your ability to understand diversity is tested. And I would agree that it's could be based on a lot of different things. Like for a lot of our clients, what our job is to do is to find success, to expand success in our target audiences, whether they be Black, brown, white, Asian, Vocaloid, whatever it is. Our responsibility is to find as many opportunities as possible and then act on those responsibilities. So that's what diversity means to me. It means innovation.
Awesome.
That's a far more eloquent option than what I gave.
No, actually, Tobi, will you tell us a little bit more about some of those programs that you were envisioning or working on to bring youth into your spaces?
Yeah, so we partnered with a local additional nonprofit beyond the one that I run. We partnered with the Des Moines Music Coalition, who does a lot of outreach in terms of youth education programs and those kinds of things. And so we actually work to promote shows in high schools, like, trying to literally promoting them, like going to get the students in high schools and middle schools, but working to pair one of those younger acts with a more established artist within the community. So we would have a diversity of audience. So we would have, the more established band that would bring in their typical audience that would come in. And then we had these youth that were able to have access to that audience, and also start to cultivate their own audience. The other thing that we started to implement just before COVID closed was also working with the local Boys and Girls Club on a program that we called Hype, which was basically a kind of creativity program that we did working with youth, and then we would bring them into the venue to put on a performance as part of the sort of culmination of the 8-week program that we were facilitating with them. And then we most recently, during COVID times, is we developed something called Writing History with a local for-profit company, but we worked with an intentional lower income housing community called Oak Ridge here in Des Moines. And we went in and worked with their youth program and worked with the youth for them to create a song and created a mixtape with local artists that were contributing to the mixtape. And then we did a live stream of the local artists and then debuted the video and the song that the youth put together. So trying to find ways that we can get them engaged in the arts and get them to understand that live music is something that they can participate in and is something that's available. Instead of, as I mentioned before we started, where my kids spend, most of their free time trying to either, sports or video games. So trying to instill in them that live music is an experience.
Absolutely. Did any of you sort of have a precise moment where you realized that you needed to diversify your programming, your audiences? And if so, can you tell me about sort of what that light switch type moment was?
And I think that as independent venue operators, we have freedom to do things that big corporations don't necessarily have. You don't necessarily even, or at least I didn't consider it particularly a diversification effort when I brought Deepak Chopra and India Arie together for an event, right? So yes, it was mixing ethnicities, but it was also mixing presentation styles and forms, right? Music and spoken word. And so the ability to do things that reach different people in different places. The audiences are similar, right? But they don't know each other. So the ability to bring that together in a space that is safe and is welcoming and is questioning is just a delight. It's not just about the business model. Yes, we have done things this year that we wanted to do before because we like different forms of music and different approaches to art forms, but we never had the time. We focused on, in the past, those things that were, financially lucrative, the biggest bang for the buck. And trust me, one of the things you learn in COVID season is that it takes exactly the same amount of energy to produce an event that you can only have 100 people in as it does to produce an event that you can have 6,000 people in. But you never had time to do those things that would attract the smaller audiences before because it, didn't make financial sense, so to speak. This year it did. So we did things that people might consider out of the box. Not really. It just, now it made sense.
Totally. So I wanted to start in the before times, but I have many sort of follow-up questions to that of what programming and what events and what diversifying your audience means in, as I mentioned earlier, this current hellscape. So again, before times, like I said, I'm a music journalist. My experience in venues is I go to there and I have a great time, and it's, a part of my identity since I for as long as I can remember. So when, you know, I was presented with sort of the theme of this panel discussion, my immediate thought was like, well, why don't you just book more and different performers and your more and different audiences will show up? Disprove that for me, or please elaborate on what that process is actually like for you, or what it was, you know, in the before times, and what are some of the struggles that you actually faced?
Well, when we're launching, I guess I'll start from the agent aspect. When we're looking at artists, we're trying to figure out where we can create a plan of success with them. We'll sit with the manager, we'll sit with the artist, we'll sit with the label, and we'll start to figure out, okay, what are the goals for the next 2 years, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and just start piecing together where we think it's going to work. If it's a musical artist, we go a lot to Spotify. We check a lot of their YouTube videos and we find out where their pre-existing market is. Then we'll dig a little deeper and figure out where we think their market could grow based upon the characteristic of the current audience, their semiographics, their ethnographics, where they think there's going to be a fan base where similar artists have had it, and then how you really grow it and build the fan base is a lot of one sheets, which is, you know, just putting together a document that has all the band's existing social media, all the releases, all the reviews, and presenting it out to as many promoters as you can, as many artists as you can, utilizing email, calling people, hitting people up in the way you've hit them up before, and trying to find that first hold on the mountain that you can hold on to, and then build around it and build other dates into it and build successes. A lot of times we'll have artists in which we work on the process with them for months before we even book a date, before we even sign the act, because the goal isn't to add another artist onto the roster, but the goal is rather to have a success with a client. I know for all of our artists, what we're seeing is that the amount of venues is expanding, the amount of countries doing performances, and this is all pre-COVID. It's expanding a lot. The internet's expanding a lot. The agent doesn't need to be the role of the gatekeeper to say no. There's no real upside to doing that, because it's very easy for any artist or an artist that wants to tour with one of your acts, or a venue. It's very easy for them to email any offers or any information directly to a client as much as it is to us. So the older version of what agencies used to do is kind of different. Our role is really to educate our clients about what's out there, to build a strategy, and to educate venues about places to play, and just staying on top of it. And we find that, you know, if venues understand it and they can come up with concepts and they feel that they've got an audience, that audience will be reflected in their offer. And we put all of our offers in front of our artists, and then we talk with the artist about how long they really want to be on the road, how much time that they have in order to dedicate themselves to new markets versus just existing markets, and then make moves from there. I don't know if you wanted me to go more into like how it had to deal with COVID, but that's kind of like how we make decisions and how our artists make decisions based upon, like, I represent a lot of acts from international countries. That's kind of the format that we do anytime we're going into a new continent.
Cool. Let's stay in the dreamlike world of a pre-pandemic universe, and then I'll circle back around to sort of how the pandemic is affecting us all.
I mean, I think that also, I think it might, you know, I don't know from Shahida's perspective, but I know, you know, for us being a small venue, you know, I think we might have a little bit more of an ability to be more nimble in some ways. And so one of the things that we did from the outset was created a position within the venue of somebody that was a community liaison. So we had someone that was going out and being very intentional about engaging different communities, whether that be communities of color, whether that be, theater communities, comedy communities, but being very intentional and creating partnerships with some of these other entities. So, one of the things that we noticed here in, being in Des Moines, Iowa, the demographics of the city are, it's something like, 80% white and, maybe, 10% Black, and then, another, 10% of varying ethnicities. And we would see a lot of, cultural festivals and things in the summer, and then you would see like a diversity of the people coming together for those things. But then when there were individual events that might feature one of those artists, say from the Latino Heritage Festival, you didn't see any white folks, and that's the predominant audience that's here in the city. And so basically what we wanted to do was find the best ways that we can do to say, hey, here's a venue that is, we're going to work with the Latino Heritage Organization and say, we're going to give you our space for free. We're going to draw upon, what is kind of the standard audience that goes out to live music here in the Des Moines area at most of the venues, which is your typical kind of indie rock 20-something guy band stuff, and see what we can do to promote in both universes and create something that is a more collaborative and diverse approach to programming. So I think that, again, for us, it's about the intentionality and making sure that, we prioritize diversity, and as I said, in all veins, whether that's, genre, race, or otherwise.
Well, I think that booking with intentionality has been our goal. But there have been roadblocks to that, quite honestly. And it's nice to hear John talk about his approach and his company's approach to the role of the agent. When you're talking about artists that can effectively sell, 4,000, 6,000 seats, you've got established agents that in some instances have simply gotten a little lazy, and they go to the usual suspects with the acts. We have asked for years for some acts that are non-African American, not R&B, not hip hop, not jazz. And we've been told, oh, well, that's a Black room. No, if you look at this is not a Black room. This is actually a beautiful room. And to be pigeonholed into one genre is a disservice. Like our audiences love Adele, right? Adele appeals to all kinds of people. Why can't I book her? I like Bonnie Raitt. Gee, I've been putting an offer in every year. Maybe in 2021 it'll happen. It's been a challenge to present for not so much for audiences, but for the industries to understand that we are really not in these little boxes to the extent that people think that we are. But we've got to join forces across our different roles in this industry to dissuade people of that notion, and let's get together and do some things that are just great music, great events for everybody, where we're all there jamming together, right?
That's the thing, right? Like that's the best part about live music, is that it brings people together who wouldn't otherwise be in the same room together, right? Like that's why we all love this and why we do what we do, right?
Right. And there's a tradition of that in some places, but some of that tradition is waning. Like with the segmentation of our media, we've lost the ability to know each other's cultures quite as well as we used to. I'm looking out my window now at Canada. I used to listen to the Canadian music stations all the time because there were only 5 stations in the area, right? So yes, now that doesn't happen.
Well, and I think, to your point, I think that people do forget about the complexity of humans. Like, we're not sort of black and white beings, that they're we do have a variety of tastes and a variety of different interests and things. But one of the things that I think that, and I don't know if it was on a panel that's coming up or a panel that's already happened, but one of the things that we're discussing in one portion of NEVA, and also something that we're looking into personally at XPK, is the idea of the for-profit, nonprofit partnership and marriage, right? So one of the things that is hard in a market like Des Moines that is predominantly white, and that's what predominantly sells, we also aren't getting a lot of offers for acts of color that are coming through, or if we are, they're the very, very cultural, like the tours that are coming from Israel, and they're on a particular kind of mission in their tour aspect. And I think that developing a nonprofit entity where you can go and seek funding for things that may not necessarily have a draw, so you're able to present the work, you're able to present the show, and you're not worried about the bottom line as much. Like maybe you've gotten a grant to be able to present this work, that it might not, it may start by only having 30 people in the room, but by the 3rd or 4th time that it comes around, maybe then we do have a sellout show. And I think that I think we have to start looking at alternative models of what putting a show on looks like in order to make this diversification that we want to see happen. Because
Tobi,
at the
I'm
end,
so glad. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say, because at the end of the day, we are still businesses, and you still have to make money, and sometimes those things can be counterproductive to one another, and so we have to figure out ways to bridge that gap.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought that up. My next question was actually going to be addressing this this space between art and commerce, if you will. I feel like a lot of us in the music industry struggle with that. We do this because we love the art, we love the community, but we're only able to make a career or a living out of it by integrating the commerce aspect. So yes, we can have, grand idealistic ideas of how to, book more, diverse acts and attract more diverse audiences and make our spaces safer and more inclusive. But sometimes we have to book, the bands that fund our rent, or, can you're the ones who have the venues that are booking the bands and the tours. So I was wondering if you could each sort of me about what that balance of art and commerce means for you.
Well, absolutely, you have to make financial sense, or you won't be around, right? So, but early in my career, I had a conversation with someone from the Nederlander organization, and sort of a mentor, right? That made the point that if you're only focused on booking the shows that make money, then you're not really doing your job. You gotta reach, you gotta stretch. Now you have to stretch wisely when you can, but making that reach part of your life is at least half of the fun. It allows me to do those things that are just exciting and fresh and new, and that still, after all these years in this industry, make you go, wow, I got to do that. Wow, I want to be there. Wow, this audience is now part of ours. So we're doing that more. And part of the way you do that is by linking up with people who know the space that you're trying to bring better than you do, right? That have the direct contacts with some of those audience influencers that you need to reach and have good relationships with. So I think that as you know, we're in the COVID space now, right? To say that this year we've been able to take the time to do that, to extend relationships, because ultimately that's what happens in business across the board, right? It's all about relationships. So extending relationships with new people to know, let's work together on bringing this audience into this space. And the new partnerships are exciting.
I think when we put together a tour, we look at it from the aspect of like, okay, let's not just play the same cities. Let's try new cities. Let's try to expand our horizons. And we do a lot of research as far as like different markets. And I guess kind of like the idea of what you're talking about, art and commerce. You could also say it's what you have to do and what you want to do, what the economic requirements are, and then what your eventual goals are. Well, I would say that being a promoter in the theater in Toronto, in Detroit, and being a promoter in Iowa has an inherent amount of risk, no matter what you do. Meaning, you could have shows which you think are going to be a little bit outside of the norm, but you feel like you have to do it. But if those make money, then it changes the whole thing. And you could have other times where you have a show where you're pretty sure it's going to do great, and you have to do it, and you think it's going to be a moneymaker, and it doesn't work out. And I think that the precept behind both of these ideas is that we're saying that the stuff that we have to do is economically prurient, culturally prurient, and the stuff that we want to do is maybe not economically prurient, but it's stuff that makes more sense from an ethical point of view. I kind of look at it from another way, saying both actions are in play. When we put together a budget, when we're putting together a tour, I have no idea if like a band is going to do great in Nashville, if it's going to do better in Nashville versus New York, if it's going to do better in New York versus Detroit. I don't know if it makes sense to go into Iowa versus going to Wyoming versus going to Denver versus going to Missouri. Sometimes you have an off day. You just make a gut check on it. But the best way to look at the whole thing is to look at art and commerce all being tied together. If you've got an idea of what you want to do mentally going into the whole thing, and you're presenting your client with as many ideas as possible, and you're educating venues of it as much as possible, you just kind of put it together the way that makes the most sense for the shared directive. And if your shared directive, if you have a concept, your concepts with your artists are based upon diversity and inclusion, and thinking about a 5-year plan of getting more people in the congregation into the tent, and your artists of the religion, that is going to allow everybody's spirits to be exalted to the point that they buy t-shirts and buttons and all sorts of shit that keeps bands on the road, then it all works together. And I think especially in this next year, no one knows what the hell's going to happen as far as like shows. I don't know. We've got a bunch of tours. We've got a Vocaloid tour that we're working on for next year, and it usually does great. Sells out. Our average ticket is like $90, and it plays like really nice big places. It's always done great. Have no idea if it's going to do great in the next year. And I think it's a great point of what you're talking about is like what we have to do versus what we want to do. And right now, this is a mammoth and seismic change in regards to how we deal with those two things and what is going to be the guinea pig in terms of telling us all, okay, we can be more creative. Okay, we have to be more conservative. I think one of the interesting things about COVID, and we're looking at it from a positive standpoint, it's forcing all of us. It's forcing Tobi, it's forcing Shahida, it's forcing myself to rethink who we are, what we are, why we are, why we're here, what we're doing with the tools. What does Shahida do with the venue? What does Tobi do with the bar and with the venue and with all these other things? And I think, I got a good feeling that we're going to come out of this with better concepts as to what we're going to do. Shahida's right on, which is it takes the same amount of energy for a 100-person venue as a 7,000 person event, right? So in one sense, a completely logical response is, I'm not going to do this. Screw that. It's not, I'm going to wait until the 7,000. I'm going to wait until the rest of the business comes back. But another more intelligent response is finding a way through it, finding a way, using this time to hone each of our individual abilities, each of our venue abilities, reconnecting with our audience, reconnecting with our community, finding new community, and coming up with ideas. Spending way too much goddamn time on a computer, but coming to a point where we're going to be able to get out of this. And whenever the hell this thing gets out, whether it's a vaccine or whatever the fuck in 15 months, all of us are going to have a point when we're like, oh man, feels like it's normal. And
I'm going to hug the shit out of all y'all.
And that's going to be the point where we know, did we put in the effort? What did we do? What did we do? That's what we did.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that we have to be really careful about too, particularly right now, is around the issues of accessibility for people to come into shows. Because one of the things that, we've had conversations a lot about is, our capacity. Like right now in Iowa, we can be open. We're choosing not necessarily to be. We've done a couple of things, felt weird. We're not. But there are venues that are. And, we're at limited capacity for us. A 250 cap venue, in order to do all the things that we need to do to keep people safe, then we're suddenly brought down to 54 people across, 16 patron pods. Well, suddenly, how do you make something worthwhile for both the artist, for the venue, for everybody on 54 tickets? Well, the natural inclination is to say, well, let's jack up the price. But then suddenly you're leaving out an entire level of people. We did a private-ish event recently. And it was, there was this wine tasting component that was tied to it and all of these things. But, the average person who would want to come to that show, who's used to paying anywhere from $10 to $30 to go see something, they're not going to be able to spend $95 a ticket on that, And so, from a values perspective, we're going through that now of like, how can we, even when we come out of this, I don't know necessarily if I think people are going to be yearning to go out and see live music, but I think it's going to be a minute before people feel comfortable being the sweaty arms against each other venue experience that people are used to in venues, the 250 cap like mine. And so we have to figure out how to balance those things to make it economically feasible for everybody involved, but also keep live music accessible to people and not price it out of reach.
Your bar is going to be key. It just is. You got to figure out how to really maximize your revenue from that source. This time that we're in now is the one thing that's certain is that we don't know anything, right? That's the one thing that's every day it's something new. We got to figure out something new. So we're growing new synapses in our brains to create all these new scenarios that we hadn't even thought about before. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And, you may not get far into the black, but if you're not in the red, then you're still hitting your mission. And I just encourage you to, don't lose sight of the goal and the benefit that you're providing to all concerned by doing what you can now in the best way you can.
Well, and I think that there's also, again, around the value proposition of what venues are to people. We're community gathering places, and thinking about, particularly in this time that we're closed, I know a lot of venues that, turned themselves into safe spaces for protesters during protest marches, or have become polling places.
Polling stations,
polling stations, like all of these things. And I think, what this time has forced us to do in ways is to become much more deeply rooted into the community fabric, and so I think it is going to be a lot of, let's come together and we've seen so much support from people, and not just our venue, but a lot of the other venues in the market, of people wanting, they know it's taken a really long time to build a live music culture in Des Moines. I'm sure John and John is maybe well aware of this more so than a lot of folks. I mean, we're not a primary market. Nobody's like, I want to go to Des Moines, Iowa on my next tour necessarily. And so, I think that trying to find ways that we can continue to engage in the community to maintain our relevance, because if any more of us close, we've already had a venue in our market close because of this. It's going to take a really long time to rebuild it back. And so anyway, my point is to say is just the community connections that we have. And so many of our venues right now have been supported by our local community and want to see us stay open. And I think that that environment breeds the ability to get people to, force them to see things that they wouldn't necessarily see. I know that there's a lot of people that they may see something on our bill that they wouldn't necessarily go and pay a ticket for, but right now they know that venues are hurting, or even after this, they're going to know that venues are hurting, and they're going to be like, you know what, I like XBK, so the next time that there's a show that I do want to see, I want to be able to go see it there, so I'm going to go see this other thing in the meantime just to support them.
Tobi, why do you charge more money for shipping the Fernet Branc on your website than the Fernet Branc bottle? That's unfair.
I know.
You're discriminating. I'm from California. I needed some. That's a fair price that you're offering.
Well, it's because things are a lot cheaper in Des Moines. That's why that's one of the reasons why I moved from Brooklyn to Des Moines, is it's a higher quality of life and a lower cost of living. But we don't actually ship them. That's a problem with our website issue. We do a happy hour, a drive-through vinyl happy hour on Fridays, so people can order their drink and their vinyl and come by and pick it up and move on. So we allow you to be able to open or to order your drink online.
There you go.
Tell me, I love everything that y'all just said, and it feels good. And what is hope in pandemic times? It's such a novel feeling these days. But I want to hear more about the practicalities. What are you actually doing with your venues, with your tours, with your spaces, with your companies during the pandemic? How are you in real time adjusting? What are your action items?
We knew this was coming down the pike in the third week of January. Of the merchandise company for one of our tours, we share a merchandise company with Pearl Jam, and our artist Hatsune Miku and Pearl Jam were putting together tours later this summer, and we were told that in China they had shut down the manufacturing businesses, that they opened up the doors for the people to come in, to make the shirts, to make the hats, to make everything. And we got an email saying, hey, anything that is not sent on the boat now, you're not going to get. We're like, oh, Christ. So we made a couple calls over there. And we'd already known about everything was going on right around December 27th, December 28th. We already knew what was happening. We didn't know, we knew. And so we started finding out more and more, and we realized, oh, okay, if China has to stop making products, that the Chinese people will not go to the factories to create items. And the Chinese government is expanding Lunar New Year. I think they expanded it to either 2 or 3, but expanding it past 1 is crazy. They never do that. So we knew there's serious problems, and then as a company, we all discussed and we extrapolated. We're like, okay, well, if this is going to happen to this company, this is going to happen to Volkswagen, this is going to happen to Apple, this is going to happen to all these places. And then we looked at all of the flying charts and everywhere things were going and realized, okay, if Wuhan is having this kind of impact, this thing is going to stretch out. In Wuhan, they made the announcement that they were going to block the city off, but they told people 24 hours beforehand, so everybody with a brain got out. So we knew this going into it. We know, okay, it's just a matter of time before this thing happens. And then I was over in Tokyo for meetings, And when I got to Tokyo, they had the temperature gun, and they had the masks. Masks were mandatory everywhere you went. And we'd have meetings with clients, and we had a show out there. We had an artist playing the Tokyo gun. And the first day played, and it was great. And it was sold out, and everybody had masks on, and they loved it. It was packed. And the government canceled the second day. And so we left. When we left Narita Airport in Tokyo, at least 3 times they had Tokyo customs with temperature guns on it, in your neck and everywhere. When we got to LAX, no temperature guns, no masks, everybody in the same line. And that's when we really knew, like, okay, this is going to be tough. We called all of our clients and said, okay, we could put together dates in March and April, but we have a bad feeling that a lot of this is going to go away. And then as soon as the NBA game, that's what it was. And then we talked with each artist, and we started building out strategies. We built a podcast partnership with a company called Live From Events. We've aired 85 live streams already on our system. Our bands have made, I think we've generated 500,000, more than that, a lot of money to our clients, helping them put together, helping them with a mailing list. We built out a podcast division. It's Sound Talent Media. Dave Shapiro and Matt Anderson and Tim Bohr, very intelligent, and they came up with a lot of strategies ahead of time. And we've bolstered our record company, and we're really spending the time with our artists to talk about what we want to do for the next years, to get them to build their mailing lists, to get them to build out their newsletters, to get them to build out the merchandise. And it's just constant communication. We're no longer the guys who are putting together the dates. We're the guys who are sending in the news, telling what's going on in Brazil, what's going on in Indonesia, what's going on with live stream, putting more stuff in our newsletters, getting that out there, and making sure that everybody's okay. We're having a better relationship with buyers and with a lot of promoters as well, finding out how they're doing, how they can, what we can do for them, sending people masks, and just trying to figure out how not to say things like new normal, how imaginative ways to say I don't know. Yeah, no shit. None of us know. But we can find studies. We can get ideas as to what we think are going to happen. We can be a skeptic. We can be optimistic, but we can be skeptical. We can be, okay, hopefully this will happen. Maybe not. Probably not. Let's keep thinking of other ideas. I think that's what people want. Artists don't need agents. They don't. They need guidance in the world of agenting. We don't need to have a contract with an artist. We want to have a relationship with artists so that they feel like we're bringing something to them. And so that's been the biggest thing. It's just how to pivot. And if you could do finding live stream or finding car show events, finding things like that and telling other artists about it, and building like what we can do with Motionless and White, what we could do with Guar, what we could do with Hudson and Mika, what we could do with Natalia Leprechaun, getting our sponsorships together better. And that's it. It's but what we also realize is the quick high that I have of booking a successful tour, or like, yeah, I put together, I got the goals for this band done. We needed to get that deal done, and I got that deal done. Yes, I'm stoked. We're going to play this venue. We're going to get this larger audience. That doesn't happen as much. It just doesn't. And I can understand that, and I can just build forward, and I can just go, okay, this is where we're at now, and I know that my main goal is for my artists to be healthy, for me to be healthy, all my compatriots to be healthy, and to move forward. And yeah, okay, we're not going to be able to go to baseball games, and the venue's not going to be open, and that sucks. Okay, we're past it. Now let's work on some other stuff, and let's go past it. And how do we do it? And that's why we're all here. Actually, it's one of the great things about it, sharing that. It's kind of like this peaceful desperation that we go through all day. But we take lots of notes on it, and if we share it, it's not necessarily a panic. It's kind of like a scenario. It's like a problem. And then things happen. Good things happen at the end of the day. You're like, some good things happen. The rest of it sucked. And then that's it. And then you sit and you talk to each other and you go, we are living in the most amazing time in our lives. And this is going to be one of the most horrible winters that the majority of Americans have ever lived in. Both at the same time. XFL was in 2020, and that was a good football league. There.
I want to give Shahida and Tobi a chance to answer or to chime in here, but I also just want to point out we have about 10 minutes left. I know we have at least 2 questions from our attendees, so just a heads up on timing really fast. And anyone who is tuning in, if you do have questions and want to type them in the Q&A space, do that now, and we'll get to as many as we can. Right.
The worst of times, the best of times, absolutely true. Just roll with it, keep breathing, keep being creative, do what we do, committed to it.
Yeah, I think we've taken the approach of, looking, again, trying to be a community resource and thinking about how, we're a space, we have a bunch of production equipment, and so how can we put that stuff to work? And so we're looking at developing things with our local NPR affiliate, and trying to think of ourselves as a production house, and less as a music venue right now. And so, once we can open our doors and sort of bring those two things together, I think it'll be really amazing. And then, from a very practical standpoint, like I said, we opened in September, and anybody who's opened a new business, particularly a physical business, and having gone through construction and all of those things, you're flying by the seat of your pants all the way up until the day that you open the door. And so we've been able to take some time and take a breath and really put into place a lot of things that we just really didn't do early on, like, putting in procedural things and different stuff. So I think that's been, really helpful to have a little bit of that space.
Oh, did I forget to say that, we started doing funerals.
Wow.
Memorial services. It seemed bizarre, but it's a service that people needed, and people needed to get outside to have gatherings of a certain size, and it's been beautiful. It's emotionally taxing. It's a new space for us to have a body on stage.
It's a mitzvah, my people say. That is a good deed.
It gives life. Yeah. That death gives life.
It did.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm going to throw it back to our attendees. Anonymous attendee wrote, what are steps historically non-diverse spaces can take to earn the trust of marginalized communities?
Invite people in.
Yeah.
Make friends. Get to know folks. Have a cup of coffee. Talk about it.
Yeah. I think that I think what a lot of folks have this tendency to say is like, we talked about earlier of like, I'm going to book a Latino act, and of course it's going to bring in our Latina and Latino community to see it. And it doesn't work that way. You have to go and you have to be intentional, and you have to make those relationships and build those relationships. I think that a lot of people, again, with smaller venues, a lot of sort of what the initial bookings are about relationships, and your first crowds are about the people that you know. Well, that's exactly what you need to do. Diversify who you know, and then those people are going to come in and support you.
People in the industry love to drink. What you should do is go have an assistant or an intern go to every radio station in like 20, 25 mile radius, put together like a free happy hour, have them come in. They'll all go because they can all hang out with each other and, have a little party and stuff like that. And then you just start finding out what they're listening to, what they're doing. I used to run a venue called House of Blues in Los Angeles. And that was our toughest part, that we were located on Sunset Boulevard, but everybody at the venue was of a certain background. Everybody was from Boston, Massachusetts. It was my responsibility to fill the place 365 days a week. I had to work hard to get in Latino audiences, Korean audiences, Japanese audiences, Muslim audiences, Vietnamese audiences, and you just push at it. And I think it goes back a lot to what you were talking about in the beginning of diversity. If you're committed to diversity, and I know each one of these venues that are on the panel, they're not looking at black dollars, white dollars, brown dollars, they're looking at dollars. If you look at it from the sense of that concept, then you are naturally encompassing everyone. You're naturally building towards everyone. And then you can do an analysis. You go, I need to get more this part of the community than that part of the community. But just doing events every once in a while, it's crucial. Having lunches or just having coffee with people, just talking with them and learning stuff and being into the idea of like, I want to have 3 things every day that I know nothing about, and just start learning.
And I think the other part too is living your values and diversifying your staff. You know, I mean, I think that that's a large part of it, is like hiring practices and who's on your team and all of those things. It's going to be really hard, you know, to bring in an audience of, you know, and I'm speaking in very literal black and white terms, but, you know, it's hard to have a venue that's staffed entirely by white folks and predominantly attended by all white folks, and then, you know, you just throw a hip hop show and expect black folks to feel comfortable in the space, and it doesn't always work that way, you know. So I think that, you know, diversity starts from, you know, looking internal and looking in your own house and cleaning up your own house, and then, you know, working anti-racist practices and being intentional about connecting with communities of color.
And don't be afraid. I mean, we all have some trepidation sometimes about that which we do not know, that which we are not familiar with. And you look at that, you face that, and you go anyway. You go anyway. You welcome people and you try not to put your foot in your mouth, but, you know, apologize if you do and keep going. And, you know, people are people. If you just, you got to take the leap.
Yes. I think that is probably a great note to end on. So how about you each go around and tell our viewers, listeners, how to stay in touch, how to learn more about your places and what you do, and then I'll throw it back to Moose.
We are the Aretha.com. The Aretha Franklin Amphitheater, the Aretha.com. You will find my contact information there, and follow us on all of the various social medias. We also have a series of webisodes on our website that will tell you a little bit about what happens backstage, and that's kind of crazy. So,
also, if there are any ways to that folks can support what you were doing, please share. Like, I want that hoodie, Tobi. Like, can I buy XBK? Sorry.
XBK, yeah. I'll send you a link. It is available on our website at xbklive.com, and you can find us on all social media networks at XBK Live.
Cool.
We're at Sound Talent Group, soundtalentgroup.com, and you can find all of our information there. And thank you for having this panel and having this ability to share ideas with everybody. Really cool.
Cool. And you can learn more about roots music and independent journalism at nodepression.com. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Moose, for having all of us, bringing this incredible group together, and back at you.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining us for this session. I found it personally very rewarding, so I appreciate the giving that everybody did. A special thank you to Hilary for leading the conversation, and of course, all of you for joining us. Join us next in a half hour at 3 p.m. Eastern for Beyond the Stage, the effect venues have on the economy. Dave Brooks from Billboard is going to be moderating that one, along with Mira from Music Portland, Ariel Pallets from New York City's Office of Nightlife, and Kate Becker, the legendary Kate Becker from Seattle. And join us tomorrow for Get Schooled, a day of panel programming and discussions geared towards students of all ages interested in pursuing a career in live events. If you have students or people that would otherwise be students in your mailing list and you want to let them know, that would be great. They and you can go to independentvenueweek.com for a look at tonight's programming, as well as links to all of the items in our fundraiser auction for the NEVO Emergency Relief Fund. Again, thank you.